All right, copywriters, welcome back to the Copywriters Podcast with your host, the world's greatest copywriting coach, David Garfinkel. David, how you doing today?
Nathan, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So on our last episode, actually, you mentioned that that due to the wildfires and stuff, you had a couple of issues, but you're feeling a little bit better now, and I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks. Yeah. No, we've had more than enough rain to cleanse our atmosphere, and I'm feeling good. Also got some sleep.
Nice. All right. So I didn't get a chance to say that on the last one because it was just jam-packed full of so much good information that I didn't want to interrupt. But I'm glad that you're feeling good, and we're back to doing the podcast. And I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you introduce this week's episode.
Sure. Thanks. So, have you ever played dominoes? You know what a domino is?
Playing dominoes like where you slap them down on the table, or playing dominoes where you put them up one next to another and you tip one over?
Yeah, exactly. Where you put them up one next to another and you tip them over.
Okay, yes. So I've played both dominoes. I think the second one is my favorite way to play dominoes, though.
Yeah, it's a lot easier, and usually doesn't end up costing you money. So what I want you to do is imagine if you had a little tube of super glue and you put it on the bottom of the last domino and you really let it dry and you just tried to knock that domino over. Probably wouldn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But suppose you took a small domino, or you made that one a small domino, and you had some really big ones in front of it, and you started to push them, and one would knock the over. By the end of the last one, it could probably even knock over the one that was fixed to the surface with super glue, couldn't it?
Mm-hmm. You would think so.
Yeah. So the reason I create that tortured analogy is because it has a lot to do with the secrets of the close, as you will see shortly. And although every domino has a specific number of dots on it, what I'm about to say has no dots at all. Copy is powerful. You're responsible for how you use what you hear on this podcast. And most of the time, common sense is all you need. But if you make extreme claims or if you're writing copy for offers in highly regulated industries like health and finance and business opportunity, you may want to get a legal review after you write and before you start using your copy. My larger clients do this all the time. So dominoes, let me ask you, do you know what picking an apple, checking out at the grocery store, and getting someone to accept a marriage proposal all have in common?
I cannot even imagine.
Okay, well, if you want to pick an apple, maybe all you're thinking about is picking an apple, but there are a few things that come before that apple is ready to be picked. You need soil, you need sunlight, you need water to grow it, you need a tree, and then you need the growing season. After all of those things have produced the apple, it's pretty easy to go up to the tree and pick a ripe apple.
Yeah.
Now, checking out of the grocery store, there's really some steps before you get to the cashier. Making a list, which is optional. Going to the store, which is necessary. Getting a shopping cart, which is optional. Getting the groceries. And then waiting your turn in line, which is highly recommended. And then checking out. Okay. So checking out, actually, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that have to happen before you check out. And what about getting someone to accept a marriage proposal? And if you just go up to someone random in the street that looks pretty good and say, hey, you want to get married? I don't know. But if you find a person you like, ask them out, you go on a few dates, you get to know them, meeting their family, up to you, and then asking them to marry you, you'll have a much better chance, right? Mm. And here's the thing. Closing is like picking the apple or checking out the grocery store or getting someone to accept a marriage proposal. It's really the last step in the process. And so many people focus on, well, what clothes should I use? How do I close? What are the words? And as you can see, if you put all of the weight and all the pressure, or you need to put all of your muscle into the close, maybe it's not going to work so well. But if you do a good job on the previous steps, then it's not all that difficult to do.
Mm.
And so I guess the question would be, what are the previous steps when you're closing?
Yeah, I just want to go back to your example of dominoes. There's videos on the internet where they show people will have different sized dominoes, and the big domino will be the last one at the end. And there's no way the first domino could knock it over, but a domino can knock over another domino that's just a little bit bigger. And then that one can tip into one that's just a little bit bigger. And that one can tip into one that's just a little bit bigger. And then eventually it can knock down this big domino that would have been impossible otherwise. It kind of sounds like that's what you're saying. If you know how to sequentially lay out your dominoes one after another, that last domino is not very hard to knock over at all.
That's right. And it actually gets to one of the first points that we're going to talk about in all the things that happen before closing. But if you have a very large domino as your next to last one, and then you have that little domino with the super glue, the amount of momentum from a large one, all of the other ones coming over, it's probably going to break the bond being the money that your prospect is holding on to so tightly. Now they want to release it so that they can have your excellent offer.
Nice. Okay, so I've got a really good visual analogy to kind of go with as we're going through this episode in my head. So yeah, let's jump into it. How does this work?
Okay, so there's three main areas, and each area has little components. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is not like the components of copy, write this first, write this second, write this third. We've talked about that in lots of other episodes, and people probably know that by now. What we're talking about is something a little more abstract, a little more almost poetic, or I mean, it's very real and it's very tangible, but you'll see, like, because the first thing your copy needs to have is energy. Now, where does energy come from? I mean, you go down to a gas station and soak your piece of paper with gasoline? I don't think so. No, energy comes from confidence, and confidence comes from enthusiasm. Confidence and enthusiasm will lead to momentum. I mean, that's what's going on with the dominoes. With the tree and the marriage proposal and the groceries are sort of broken up into stop, start, steps. But with the dominoes, it's a very smooth thing. Your copy needs to have energy, and one thing that's going to allow you to write with energy is to have all of the doubts and the stoppers inside yourself out of the way. And that energy will come when you have enthusiasm and confidence and momentum. A lot of those things will come from our next step, but I'm sure you know what I mean, Nathan. There are times when you're performing or when you're creating, writing, ideating, that things are just going smoothly, nothing's in the way, and you have a lot of momentum. And there are other times when you couldn't come up with the next word if your life depended on it.
Yeah, and one of the other things that you mentioned that I would like to bring up is also sales is the transfers of enthusiasm. And if you can't be enthusiastic and if you can't portray that enthusiasm in your writing, it's really hard to get the other person to be enthusiastic about buying.
That's right. I mean, it's hard to say which words convey enthusiasm and which sentences do, but when you're feeling it and you express it, somehow it comes through. This next part is called preparation and context. These are things that happen before you start writing. For your copy to really work, in other words, for the person to welcome the close or at least not resist it, you need to meet the customer where they are, not where you'd like them to be or where you think they should be, but where they really are. And there are a couple of things you can find in breakthrough advertising. Now, my book's Breakthrough Copywriting. We're talking here about Gene Schwartz's book, Breakthrough Advertising, which is, as books go, expensive and worth every penny. And I think you can find it online at breakthroughabvertisingbook.com. So Gene Schwartz has a couple of chapters in there. One of the chapters is about the 5 stages of customer awareness. And we won't go through all 5 of them today, but let's go through a couple. Stage 2 of customer awareness. There are 5 stages. Stage 2 is where your prospect knows about your product, but they don't want it yet. They might know a number of them and they might prefer a different one, or they might just know a number of them and they haven't decided which one they want yet. So that's one stage of customer awareness. Here's another one. It's stage 5. Your prospect is completely unaware of your product. They might even be unaware that there's any kind of product like yours. So that it's not that they're aware of your competitors and they're not aware of yours. It's just a completely unaware prospect. Okay. There are a lot more people in the second market. They're harder to sell, but if you can sell them, that's great. In stage 2, the first market, it's a lot smaller and it's a lot riper. It's the apple ready to be picked. So you need to know which of those 5 stages your market is in. And then secondly, Gene Schwartz has another chapter about stages of market sophistication. It's from Breakthrough Advertising. It's a different chapter. And so let's say we'll just talk about a couple of those. For example, if you're first in the market, you're going to write a very different kind of product or you're going to write very different copy about your product than if you're deep in battle with your competitors in the 4th stage of market sophistication, what's called a red ocean market in the blue ocean, red ocean. Red because the ocean is just striated with blood because there's so much, to the death competition. That stage, you need to know where you are compared to your competitors and how your market sees where you are. And then you need to write in such a way that your market matches up with what your prospects want to read. So you can see how knowing these 2 very precise things is like triangulating the prospect to identify them in 3D space in a way. I know that sounds complicated. What I mean is to know exactly where they are. Then you speak to them in their language. That's the third thing, knowing the customer language. If you sound like them, then you will engender trust. They'll feel like you belong. You're one of them. If you sound different, that makes them uncomfortable. It makes them much less likely to buy. And even if you sound like them, if you approach them like they know a lot about your product when they don't, or you approach them like they know nothing about your product when they're just trying to decide between you or 2 competitors, you can see how that's going to make closing an uphill battle. So you want to get those things straightened out. And then there's a third part.
Can I jump in before we get to the third part?
Please do.
The way I like to think of this is you want to have, when somebody first joins your copy, you want to have a feeling like they're hitting the ground running, and you want to have it hitting the ground running at the speed that they're already running. So if they hit the ground and they're running a lot faster, say they're a warm market who doesn't need any, you don't have to inform them about anything. You don't need, and they hit the ground and they're running 15, 20 miles per hour, and you're only traveling, the ground's only moving at 3 miles per hour, they're going to trip and fall, and it's not going to be a good experience for them. Same thing the other way. If you're trying to sell to somebody who's already well aware, or the way you're writing it is for somebody who's already well aware, already running 15, 20 miles per hour, and you try to deliver that to somebody who has no idea what's going on, and they're only traveling themselves at 3 miles per hour, again, they're going to get swept up, they're going to fall, they're going to tumble. So you need to have your copy match the speed at which your person is running when they hit the ground so that it's a smooth transition in.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually a better way to say it. And yeah, so the Gene Schwartz stuff is tools to figure that out, but ultimately it's not analytical. Ultimately, it's kinetic. It's moving. It's just like you're talking about.
Hmm.
So that's really good. There's one more piece of this after we talk about how fast the ground's moving, how fast the customer is moving, or the 5 stages of customer awareness, 5 stages of market certification, knowing their language. There's one more piece of it, and that is making a good enough, believable enough promise to hook the customer. And we've talked a lot about that. We've talked about promises in other episodes. We've talked about big ideas. We've talked about hooks. I think we had Mr. Big Idea himself, Joe Schriefer, on to talk about it. So we're not going to go into that too much here because it's available on other shows on copywriterspodcast.com. But let's just talk about why this is so important and what it needs to have. It's important because when you have a promise that really resonates with your prospect, that means you know your prospects well enough so that you can do this. You need to get specific enough so your prospect can visualize your promise in action. And then you need enough proof that actually convinces your prospects. It's not like you have a checklist and you go, oh, I put proof in it. Like, it needs to work. When people read it, they need to believe it. And we talk about proof in other shows too, but you need to have enough proof that convinces your prospects that what you're saying is true, so they believe you. So, if you can think of all of those things we've just talked about in the second area, preparation and context, that's really going to set people up very favorably to buy something, right?
Hmm. When it comes to proof, actually, I have an example of that. One of the guys that's in one of my masterminds, he runs a community called the 25K Club, and a lot of the people that are in the community have actually gone way beyond 25K in their businesses, but he keeps it named the 25K Club because that's what's most believable for the people that he's going after. If he made the promise of what he actually delivers, he's seen a decrease in people signing up. So he keeps it at a believable promise, even though he's able to over deliver that, because the believability of the promise is so important to actually getting people to actually follow through with making the commitment.
It really is. And, it's also a great example, though he might not be thinking of it this way. He might, is under promise and over deliver. I mean, he says 25K, but actually turns out to be a lot more. Well, you don't usually blame someone for that. Now, if he says, 250K and the best you can do is 100, they'll definitely blame you for that. So it's a really good example. I like that.
Nice. Did we have anything else before we're out of here?
Oh, yeah. There's a third thing. After you do all those things, the final category your copy needs is a strong, emotionally popping summary just before the close. And this is so important. And I've seen people leave this out. And often it's hard to do this because you're so tired after you finish writing your copy that you just don't have the oomph to do it. So sometimes it might be good to write the summary, before you actually get into all of the, knit and grit of the copy. So the summary comes after the offer, but before you actually put up a payment link. A summary is typically very tight, very factual, and it's arranged in a way that is exciting and compact. It's the sum total of everything they get. It can be bullet points. It can be a paragraph. It's staccato, boom, 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 boom. It's not the long, languorous, flowing, relaxed summer hammock kind of thing. It's like, you need to do this right now because here is what you get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after, especially with a long form sales letter, after they've gone through, there might be a lot of things that they either the things that they just read are the most pressing on them. They might have forgotten some of the points that you made earlier. They might have forgotten some of the benefits, but right as you're going to transition into that close, bring up those most powerful things again so that they're fresh in their mind before you ask them to make the commitment.
Right. And the important thing here is that the energy and the pace need to be high. You don't want to bog them down in such a detailed summary that they lose all of their excitement. You want to keep the excitement going.
Mm-hmm. So important. And it's one of those things where I don't know if there's a way that you can tell people how to do it, but as you're reading it, you can definitely tell if that energy is there.
Yeah, I think the best way is to look at a lot of sales letters, watch some infomercials, attend webinars. Some of these things are sort of, I guess the word I was looking for is qualitative or subjective. In other words, they're experienced. It's like you can't do it by, paint by numbers, but when you've been through it enough yourself, through that experience, you know what it's like. And then, here are some of the ways to help you get there faster. So, yeah, let's wrap up. If you do your energy part and your emotion and prep and context and momentum right, and you have a good, strong summary at the end, you're speaking in the language, you're meeting them where they are, you'll hardly need any pressure at all. You just need a good, straight, confident, straightforward close. You might want to put a little urgency, put a time limit on it. Let maybe a crossroads close to let them know if they don't make this choice, what the downside is. But that'll work. Let's just review it all again. Energy comes from confidence and enthusiasm, leads to momentum and good preparation and context. The second area, it comes from knowing the stage of customer awareness and the level of market sophistication, which leads to talking to the customer in the right language. And finally, a good, strong summary before your close.
Nice. Okay, so this was, when you first told me about this episode, I was worried that there was going to be overlap from other episodes, but this is pretty much all fresh stuff on how to actually get the close to work. So I was pleasantly surprised by this week's episode, David.
Well, good. I was too. I mean, it took me a while to figure out how to do this, because these are things I've noticed. I've never heard anyone talk about. I've heard people talk about the summaries. I've heard people talk about pieces of it, but I've never seen people put it together before. So glad I was able to pull it off.
Definitely. So when you're going to write the close of your sales letter, definitely keep these things in mind. And do we have any idea on what we're going to be talking about next week on the podcast?
Yeah, we do. As a matter of fact, a best-selling copywriter is soon to be a best-selling fiction author, and he's going to tell us what's the difference between what copywriters know about storytelling and what novelists know about storytelling. You'll need popcorn for this one.
Nice. All right. I can't wait. Okay. Until then, if you want to get your Copywriters podcast fix, head on over to copywriterspodcast.com and make sure that you like, subscribe, and rate the show on iTunes. Help us get into the ears of more listeners. And we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thanks. See you next time.